So moving ahead with question number 3, what are the basic steps to create a service using WCF? In this, what we will do is that basically we will create a small service using WCF, and then we will try to consume this service and see that what are the various steps involved practically to create a service. Now what I've done is that because this video is a bit big, I have divided this video into two parts. The first part is where we are going to create the service, and the second part is where we are going to consume the service. Okay, so taking up part 1, creating the service. Now let's talk about a small service which we are going to build. This is basically a cost calculation service. So what it does is that it takes up a product name, it takes up product quantity, it takes up product cost, and then it multiplies the quantity with the per product cost and gives us the total cost. So this is a service which we would like to build using WCF. So as I said that this is the first part, so here we will create the service, and in the next part of the section we will consume the service using a ASPX client. Creating a WCF service is a 3-step process. As we had previously discussed, that we are going to make a service which is basically going to take up quantity, per product cost, product name, and it's going to give us the total cost, which is nothing but multiplication of quantity into per product cost. So the first thing we will need to do is that we need to define some kind of generalized interface, which can help us to communicate this data to the service. It will help us to not only communicate input data but also get the output of total cost. So we need some kind of interface. So what I've done is that we are going to define an interface with name called as get total cost. So if I want to get the total cost, what I will do is that I will just say, okay, hey service, give me get total cost for this product name, for this quantity, and for this cost, right? So let's open our Express Edition software and let's create this WCF service. Now in our whole training video of WCF, WPF and WWF, we are going to heavily use Express Edition. So basically, in case you don't have a download of the Express Edition of 2008, what you can do is that you can go to www.microsoft.com/express and download the free software from there. Basically, Express Editions are nothing but they are downsized versions of Enterprise Edition, which help us to evaluate the quality of Microsoft products. So what I've done is that basically in this WCF service creation, we are going to use the Visual Web Developer Edition. So I've installed that. In case if you have bought the DVD, right, you will get this Visual Web Developer Edition as an installable Visual Web Developer Express Edition as an installable from the DVD. But in case if you have bought the online subscription, then you need to download this from the Microsoft site. Okay, so I've installed my Web Developer Edition. So let's go there and let's click 2008 Express Edition. Now Microsoft has given us a template for WCF service. So file, new project, and you can click on WCF service application. I have selected C# as my language. WCF service calculator. Let's give a good name to this. Right. So what it will do is that it will create for me the basic needed files by which I can host a service. Okay, and I'm not going to do anything at this moment. I'm going to just keep it as it is. So let's go back again to a PowerPoint slide, and what we need to do is that we need to define an interface called as get total cost by which we can communicate with the service. Now for this, you need to define an interface with a service contract attribute, right? Now let's go to the WCF service. When we created the service, it has made an interface file called as iservice.cs. So let's open this and let's delete the default interface what we had over there, and let's paste our interface. Okay, and let's try to understand this first. So basically what we are telling over here is that the interface is going to be named as iService calculate cost, and the method is get total cost, and you need to give the product data. We will come into this product data type. Okay, now with this interface also you need to attribute it, saying that okay, this is a service contract, because the service name has to be attributed by service contract, or the interface has to be attributed by service contract. So by this the WCF service knows that I have to host this as a service. Second, the method names are attributed by operation contract attribute. So we need to attribute the interface and the method with service contract and operation contract respectively. Okay, so our first step is completed. We have defined the interface, we have defined what's going to be the method name by which, or function name by which the client can call the service. Now if you see, the other point what we have is this complex data which we are going to pass. In other words, the second step what we need to do is that we need to define a data type called as product data, which will help us to pass this three values, into the service. So what we need to define is a data contract. A data contract basically is something like a complex data type. I will remove the default data contract what they had defined, and I will paste my data contract here. So here's our data contract. Now what does this data contract tell? What does this data contract say us? This data contract says that basically you are going to pass up the quantity, the product cost, the product name, right? And there is going to be a set and a get for every of this property. Now because this is a WCF data type, or we have exposed this as a service data type, we need to basically attribute it with a data contract attribute, and we need to attribute the properties with a data member attribute. So we have completed two things. We have completed the interface, we have completed the data type. Now we need to write the core implementation logic. So now that we have completed the way the external client can communicate with the service, we also need to write the core implementation logic, which is nothing but this calculation, or we can say our business logic. So let's again move out there and let's take up our implementation logic. Basically I have in order to save time and minimize the video size, I have initially coded this and put it in a notepad, and then I'm explaining you step by step that how we can implement it. Now the iService1.cs basically defines the interface and the data contract. In other words, it defines the service contract and the data contract. The implementation, you need to put it in the service1.svc.cs. We will come to this, what is SVC and etc. But at this moment, just remember that the implementation is written here. So let me delete the default class which was given by the template. So here's my service calculate total cost. This is my class. The first thing, it needs to implement the iService calculate cost interface. Now this iService calculate cost interface is nothing but your service contract which you have defined. Okay, and I have implemented the get total cost function. Okay, and I have written my logic which basically multiplies the product cost into product data into product quantity, and returns a string saying the total cost of the product is whatever is the product name and the total cost to the string, total cost. So basically it will give me a string saying that the total cost of the product is X, the total cost of the product shirt is 100 rupees or whatever it is, or $100, whatever it is. So in other words, your implementation logic is defined here. Okay, so we have completed the third part of it. We have defined our implementation logic. Okay, now there are a couple of things we need to change in the config file. First, what we'll do is that we'll just make our physical file names much better. So what I will do is I will just make this thing as, because it doesn't look to have a name called as iService1.cs, so let's make it iService calculate.cs, calculate cost.cs, and let's make this better again so that we don't get confused by the names. Okay, so what do we have till now? We have the interface which has defined the service contract and the data type or the data contract. We have implemented this interface and written our core business logic or core logic implementation logic in the service calculate cost.svc, and now we are ready to execute this service, or I'll say rather that we have completed the 90% part of the service. Okay, so now that we have put in our services contract and also we have defined a logic, we need to make a couple of changes in the web.config file. Now remember that the web.config file basically drives that what is the name of the service, where it's going to be hosted, what is the interface, etc. So in order to define all these things, what you need to do is that you need to go to the system.service model tag, which is in the web config file, right? And there is something called as a services tag, and all the WCF customization or parameterization is defined in this two XML tags. So let me just correct this because this is inserted by default. So WCF service calculator dot, it's actually service calculate cost. So let's modify this. So this is basically the name of the service. Now remember that you need to define here the actual class name which has the logic of calculation. So at this moment it is service calculate cost. Second, we also need to define the interface. So that is nothing but your iService calculate cost. Okay. At this moment what I've said is that my transport protocol is HTTP. That means it's going to be hosted in IIS. We'll come to this address binding and contract. Don't get confused at this moment. Right? What we'll do is that in this session we'll first try to complete the service and consume it, and then we will go into the nitty-gritty and explanation of details of the same. Okay, so that's what we have. So we have given the service name and we have given that what contract it has. Remember one thing, this interface basically has nothing. If you really see this iServiceCalculate.cs, the interface file has nothing. It just says that how the external party is going to communicate to us and in which and what is the data type it's going to use. Okay, and it basically abstracts this whole business logic. Okay, so you can say that this is like a protector, or this is like it plays a role of abstraction between your client and your actual service. Okay, so we have done our necessary modification in the web.config file. We have defined the class name and the service name interface. Now what we'll do is we'll just run it. So yeah, one more thing. What we need to do is that because we have changed the file names, okay, so we need to open this in the source code text editor, and you need to name this over here also. Okay, so that's one. And second, because of file name I've changed, it has modified. So this is one more thing which you need to do. Remember that .svc file will explain you later on. Just remember that you need to do this at this moment, because the video will become pretty long if we start discussing about the nitty-gritty in one video itself. So basically this is one more thing you need to do. You need to right click, open with the editor, source code text editor, and just change this over here. Okay, because you have changed the physical names of the file, so that's why we need to change here. Okay, so that's done pretty good, and we run the service. Now because we have said that this has to be hosted using WS HTTP bindings, okay, so it will host it in the IIS itself. Now that's what we have, the service calculate cost.svc, which has all the logic of hosting the service. And if we see the message file of this, it's pretty big. We'll come to the nitty-gritty details of it, but just this now says that our service is running and ready, and it can be consumed by any client. But remember, the client has to communicate using this message format. Now this message format basically abstracts this logic. So here the logic is completely in .NET, but because this message format is in XML, any client, either Java or either any client who understands XML can consume this. So in other words, in the previous video which we talked about the heterogeneous platform, the messaging system, this is what actually your WCF is doing. So the whole output of WCF, or the whole importance of WCF, is this message which is generated. And remember that this message is not something very you can say it is not something very customized, but it's more of an industry standard message, and we will talk about how it is an industry standard message in the coming tutorials. But at this moment, for your understanding, this is a very important part, that this is your message which basically helps you to communicate with this class of .NET. Okay, so we are ready with our service, and in the next tutorial we'll see that how we can consume this service.